Welcome to Summer in Review. After not doing a months in review video for a couple weeks, we're gonna just talk about the stuff that I got over the summer. Not including too many games. It was a pretty light summer in terms of collecting. Was trying to save money for a bunch of other stuff, so didn't really take the time to, buy new games every single week. But we got some cool stuff. Mainly Switch, Game Boy Advance, and some other things that we'll talk about first. But yeah, it wasn't really a big summer for that outside of too many games. So we'll get right to it. First things first, not a video game at all. If you remember from, I think, May in review or maybe April in review, I mentioned that I was starting a new hobby, or not really starting a new hobby as much as it's just collecting for a new hobby. And I collected the original master sets for Heroescape. Heroescape was originally released in 2004. It's a tabletop game where you set up a bunch of terrain, you select your team of figures, and you just go up and down terrain trying to beat up the other players. I have a lot of nostalgia for that because I played the game growing up with my friend, who showed it to me because his older brother had the sets. So what I did a couple months ago was bought the 2 master sets that were released and one of the expansions. I didn't end up buying any more expansions. There's a ton of them, but they're really expensive to get new now, especially if I'm trying to buy them brand new. If they were released in 2004, it's kind of hard to get them. But it's really funny because right around the time I got back into it and finally bought those sets, it turns out that there was a revival of Heroescape by a company called Renegade Game Studios. So the original run of Heroescape went from 2004 to 2010, and they announced and that was Hasbro. So then Renegade says, "Oh, we're reviving it. We're putting out our first master set for Heroescape." So I went and bought their master set, and I bought their 1 expansion set, and then another thing that I bought all these things from this first wave of revival, which again happened to be right around the time that I made that video, and it came in just this week, actually, of recording. So that's kind of exciting. I'll show them off. This first one is the master set, and this thing is humongous. Like, the original sets were maybe half as thick, and this thing is an absolute chunk. So that's pretty cool. Age of Annihilation, I think it's called. Yeah, that's the master set. And then the expansions that were released in the first wave. The first one is Battle for the Wellspring. There's the first one. This is just more characters that you can play as. And then there was also a terrain set that was released. So on top of having the terrain that comes in the master set, some terrain that comes in the expansion set, there was also this terrain set that came with it too. So I bought that as well, just to say I bought all the different pieces to the new Heroescape revival, which is really exciting. And because I pre-ordered everything else, they included, of course, they also put out a single character, Sergeant Drake Alexander. It's just a mini. It's just a 1 character mini. I went back and looked at my receipt to see did I order this specifically, and it cost zero because I paid money for everything else. So yeah, that was really exciting to get the first wave. And when I was looking to see when I was gonna get all this, I went back and looked on the website and saw that there was a wave 2. So I spoiled getting wave 1 when I announced the first time I bought Heroescape stuff, and now the second time Heroescape is coming up, I already paid for wave 2. There isn't a master set in the second one. It's all just expansion, but this stuff's expensive, not gonna lie. But it is cool to get it, and it's cool to have a have a real tabletop game that I could play that isn't just like a card game. So looking for the time to play this and play with other people, but it is still pretty cool nonetheless, even though that when that master set came in, when all of it came in this humongous box. So when I got the master set, I was like, where the heck am I going to put this thing? Finally found a space in my closet for it, but that doesn't mean it wasn't humongous. So with that said, that's the only non-video game thing I bought that is worth showing. And we're going to get into the video games. We're going to talk about some Switch games, talk about some Game Boy Advance games, and then go back to the last 2 things, which are also Switch games. So first one is Aka R. So Aka-R is based on a prototype from Atari in 1982. So it was made back then, never released. Video Game Crash was around 1983, so they probably didn't feel a need to put this out. But Atari gave someone the opportunity to release it in 2023 or remake it and release it in 2023, and so they did. So as you can maybe tell from the cover, very colorful, very intriguing design, and the gameplay is nothing short of that. It is very, very interesting looking. I would say it's like a modern looking version of Asteroids, but that doesn't do it justice because I'm not suggesting that the gameplay is exactly like Asteroids, but it's kind of like you play as this thing in the middle shooting things, destroying things, which is kind of like what Asteroids is, but you're fixed. And also that just doesn't do it justice to make this thing its own unique game. It is very unique. The design, the graphics are insane. So if Aka-R sounds anything interesting to you, or just as a piece of Atari history, look it up because this thing is crazy looking. It's really freaking cool. So that's the first cool one, Aka-R. Next one is there's a few typical limited run things in here, just stuff that would never get a physical release otherwise, but that's one of the good things about limited run. Second one is Another Crusade. It's a 2023 turn-based RPG. And they have these little wooden guys as your sprites, as your characters, which is like kind of cool. But that's kind of why I bought it, because it looks cool and because the gameplay looks cool. But you kind of play as these little wooden guys. This one kind of looks like Pinocchio, if I'm being honest. Your goal is to investigate. What do I have here in my notes? Investigate the effects of a meteor shower. Yeah, I don't know, but typical thing that I would buy from limited run just because it looks cool. But it's kind of a cool concept to play as little wooden guys. So, Another Crusade. Next up is one that some of you are probably very familiar with. This is Persona 3 Portable. So the original Persona 3 was released in 2006. I'm already drawing a blank as to which system it was on. I was literally just researching, and I don't know how I didn't write down the system. But original Persona 3 was released in 2006. Persona is an RPG series that's part of this larger Shin Megami Tensei series. So if you haven't heard of Persona, maybe you've heard of Shin Megami Tensei, but not games I've ever played in my life. And I'm going to not say a whole ton about it because, one, I don't know. I would be getting really into the trenches learning about the Persona series. So I'm just going to be honest and just say that I bought it. But very, very popular RPG series. The original version, Persona 3 Portable, was released on PSP in 2009, and this is a port of that PSP version that came out in 2023, just last year. So, through limited run, again, it's pretty cool, but it's kind of funny because at Too Many Games in June, limited run was there, had like 5 or 6 different games that they were just selling physical copies of that you obviously didn't have to pay for shipping for, and this was one of them. So, say what you will about limited run. If you, I like buying their stuff, but it's limited. I had to order it and get it shipped. Had to, right? In quotations, had to. But I could have just gotten it physically there, which, so it goes. But I don't know. Persona 3 Portable. I bought it because I knew what the name was. Next up is an interesting one. It's a game that is really expensive in its original state, originally released on the 3DO, but it's Plumbers Don't Wear Ties, which was originally released in 1993 as a full-motion video adult rom-com dating sim, which is kind of interesting to begin with, but it got horrendous reviews on release, and it was so bad that some people called it one of the worst games of all time, which says a lot to say one of the worst games of all time. So in 1993, full motion video was not really common back then, right? 1993, we're talking about Super Nintendo era, we're talking about N64 era, and those graphics, those cartridges weren't really enough to have full video on it, or if it was like really, really grainy video. PS1 wasn't released yet in 1993, right? I think it was 95. So there wasn't really a system that was capable. Actually, I don't think N64 was even released in 1993, now that I think about it. So, NES, Super Nintendo didn't have full motion video. So it was really uncommon for a game to have that. And the system this was released on the 3DO, did have full motion video. But if you haven't heard of the 3DO, I don't really blame you, because it was super obscure. It was a disc-based console that this originally came out on. But the crazy part about Plumbers Don't Wear Ties is that it was advertised as full motion video, but only the introduction was full motion video. Any video that was used in the actual game itself was really just pictures, still pictures. So it was kind of weird. And the gameplay itself is, even though it's like a dating sim, it's more kind of like if you ever read a book that was like, okay, you read this page and then you get to make a decision. If this, then you go to page this. If this, then you go to page this, which kind of sounds like point and click, but that would suggest that there's things to point around, but you're literally just making decisions the entire time playing the game. So kind of interesting, very quirky history, but then Limited Run was like, why don't we renew one of the worst games ever? And so they did. I think it was announced in like 2021. Initially announced in 2021, but then officially released just this year, or maybe like late 2023. And I finally got it just this summer, because, long shipping times and you buy a lot of stuff in one order. But even though it's just basically a port of the game, not really much extra, there is some extra material if you are so interested in playing the game and learning about the game. So very quirky history to begin with, not a great game to begin with, but history is good enough to, my nose flying everywhere. Kind of interesting history if you're interested in that kind of thing. So Plumbers Don't Wear Ties. Very interesting. I keep saying it's very interesting because it is. Next up, we got to get back to my notes. My notes fell all over the place. These things happen. Next up is This Way, Madness Lies, which is a 2023 turn-based RPG based on the Shakespearean universe. On the back, it literally says Shakespeare and Magical Girls, and you play as magical girls in this Shakespearean universe. I don't know how else to say that. Kind of like Another Crusade. I don't have much to say about it, although it's kind of a cool concept to be in, Shakespearean lore. Kind of weird, but This Way Madness Lies. Another of me buying a limited run game because it looks cool. One more limited run Switch game, I should say, before we move on. This one is Tokyo Dark Remembrance. So Tokyo Dark, the original game, was released on just PC in 2019, and it's a point and click that follows a girl who investigates some door deep below Tokyo sewers where no one returns if you enter through that door, which is a pretty interesting storyline, if you will. To not only go through sewers, but to go through sewers and find a door that you don't ever return from. It kind of almost sounds like a certain Super Mario movie that was released last year, where they are in the sewers and they end up going through a pipe. But, kind of funny. So, Tokyo Dark was released on PC in 2019. It was then brought to Switch and PS4. I have 2019 on here. I don't think that's true. I messed up a day somewhere. I think the original game was released 2017. And this was released on Switch and PS4 in 2019 as Remembrance, and it just has added content to the game. So, one of the things Wikipedia says is one of their extra features is that it has a full German translation. It's a good thing to have for people that want to play this game in Germany, but kind of interesting that they just said that was one of like the new features, like one of the big new features, a German translation. So, kind of cool. Tokyo Dark Remembrance. I can't remember if it was 2017 originally released, but released a few years ago, but then brought to Switch 2 years later. So that's kind of interesting. But we're not done with Limited Run just yet. One more Limited Run thing as we move to the next page of my notes. The next one is one that some of you are probably very familiar with. This is Night Trap. So we just talked about Plumbers Don't Wear Ties being a full motion video game, and this is a full motion video game. However, it was originally released on the Sega CD in 1992, so around the same time as Plumbers Don't Wear Ties, and it was truly full motion video. Like, the gameplay was actually full motion video, and what your goal is to do is that there's these girls that are sleeping over in this haunted house. I don't want to necessarily say it's haunted, but it is infested with vampires, and your goal is to protect them. So you're watching a security system, and your goal is to protect anything that happens to them by looking for security system triggers. So that's actually pretty interesting. It didn't do super well because the Sega CD was fairly obscure if you weren't, super into gaming or you weren't really a Sega person. And now the game is like $100. Same thing with Plumbers. Plumbers Don't Wear Ties is like incredibly expensive, but this is now around $100 in its original form. But it also historically is very interesting because this game, along with like Mortal Kombat, sparked congressional hearings about kids having access to games they shouldn't. Even though your goal is to protect the girls here, it is still considered raunchy enough that a kid should be playing it, which I partially agree with, right? You shouldn't be having to save girls from vampires, but it basically led to the ESRB. So because of this game, because of Mortal Kombat, enough people cared about video games to say, we can't have this on systems that are made for children. So that became the ESRB. So that's why we have E, E10+, T, mature, and so on. And this game historically is that reason. Now, all that's just the setup behind Night Trap. This is a Game Boy Advance cartridge. So at the time, around those congressional hearings, Nintendo was trying to get a leg up on every other gaming company, saying, we would never, ever put this game out on our system. Nintendo is a family brand. We would never put something like Night Trap on our systems. So they vowed that back in like the early to mid 1990s. And for April Fools in 2023, Limited Run was like, I bet we can do you one better. So they released just the full motion video on a Game Boy Advance cartridge to be released for April Fool's Day. Of course, that was April Fool's 2023. It is now August 2024 upon recording. So, yeah, it took a little bit of time to get here, but it is literally all the full motion video of the game from the 1993, and it just doesn't have any of the actual gameplay. So we talked about Game Boy Advance video just a few months ago, right before Too Many Games, and this game is basically a GBA video cartridge with all the video from Night Trap on it, which is pretty funny, pretty interesting. So yeah, kind of weird history behind Night Trap, but now it's on a Nintendo system, so I don't think Nintendo cares that much anymore, or else it probably wouldn't have been released. But kind of weird to have a Sega CD game with video on a Game Boy Advance cartridge. So that's pretty cool. The last two games, don't need to say a whole ton about them because I've talked about them at length in the past. But they are two more Yu-Gi-Oh games from the Game Boy Advance era. I grew up playing Eternal Duelist Soul. If you watched the Childhood Games series a few weeks ago, and one of those games I had was Eternal Duelist Soul, which I played to the ground, and I played to the ground not that long ago, actually, like within the past year and a half or so. And there's a ton of Yu-Gi-Oh! Game Boy Advance games. These are two more of them, Yu-Gi-Oh! Destiny Board Traveler and Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship Tournament 2004. World Championship Tournament 2004 is a lot like Eternal Duelist Soul in terms of just dueling, and Destiny Board Traveler is a little bit closer to like a weird game where you're playing on a Destiny board, which Destiny board is a card in old Yu-Gi-Oh, but the gameplay is kind of weird. There's not really much to say about this game besides the fact that it's just weird. But this one, aside from being like Eternal Duelist Soul, I learned that if you have collected every card in the game, as there is a truck going outside my window. It's a very nice day out. I have my windows open, so sorry. But one thing I learned about World Championship Tournament is that even though it's a lot like Eternal Duelist Soul, if you have collected every card, you no longer have to abide by the limited list that's in Yu-Gi-Oh! So you can have 3 copies of cards that were only supposed to be one of, which is kind of funny. So yeah, that's kind of cool. Add 2 more Yu-Gi-Oh! Games to the collection. They're also fully complete. I had both of them loose before, and now these are just complete copies, but I also went out of my way to get the trading cards that originally came with it. So most games back then came with limited edition cards, and yeah, I bought those so that the game could be completely complete, which is pretty cool. So the last set of games we'll talk about is Nintendo World Championships. So let's chat about this. So Nintendo World Championships, or NWC for short, was a series of competitions based on popular Nintendo games, where in 1990 and again in 2015 and then sometime in between them, Nintendo would tour cities in America and do competitions based on those games. So maybe you have to beat a level with in a certain amount of time, or you needed to collect a certain amount of coins in a certain amount of time, and there were just challenges, and then that happens. So at that time, there were about 350 original cartridges. In 1990, 350 cartridges that were released to participants, to people that went to these tournaments, and now those 350 cartridges are really, really expensive. We're talking like six-figure expensive. No, this is not one of them. If you haven't read it yet, it says reproduction cartridge, which I don't normally show bootleg stuff on here, but it makes sense for what we're about to talk about. So it was super expensive back then. Only came back up again one other time, and then the last time in 2015, if I think I read that right. And now, if you're talking about game collecting, the most expensive cartridges of all time are NWC, and it's gold variant. So imagine this is a real gray cartridge. This is about 350 of these were handed out to people, but there were also 26 gold ones. So imagine taking a gold Legend of Zelda cartridge, putting Nintendo World Championships on it. About 26 of those were released. For reference, one was just at auction like last week, and even though it didn't have a label at all, authentic cartridge, just no label, it went for over $200,000 just just the game, but with like fees and all that, it came out to over $200,000. So if it did have a label, it probably would have been way more than that. We're talking really, really expensive cartridges. So Nintendo kind of broached this idea again in the future in the 3DS and Wii U era with NES Remix. So I think NES Remix was, they were digital games, and then they were released physically on 3DS, and then on Wii U, I don't know, something like that. But the idea was still the same, to get challenges that you could play old games, so you're not replaying Super Mario Bros. Over and over again. You're just doing, challenges based on those games if you played them enough times. But this summer, very, very exciting, Nintendo released Nintendo World Championships NES Edition on Switch. This chonky guy. So this is the Nintendo World Championships idea put onto a Switch cartridge. So obviously with quality of life updates, user interface updates, it's essentially Nintendo World Championships on a cartridge, just modernized. So that's really, really cool. But this is specifically the deluxe set, or the deluxe edition, right? The collector's edition, whatever. And this has a ton of really cool stuff in it. And not only did I get the North American release, I also got the Japanese release, which is also really, really cool. They both came with very different stuff, and as you can see, they're completely different boxes, even then completely different size boxes. And as a piece of Nintendo history, it's really, really cool. And it's cool that there's this huge variance between the two versions. Variance so much, in fact, that I actually want to just open them up. So the Japanese one wasn't sealed the same way as this one was sealed, right? It's got a circle seal here. So I'm going to open this one just to take out some of the stuff. But the Japanese one was already open, so I already went through that one just to make sure everything was in there. But yeah, let's go through them super fast. I already know what's in here for the most part. I don't remember everything that was in here, but it is still cool to go through. If I could get the box open, I would love to show you what's inside. Bear with me, please. There we go. So, first thing, what was this first thing? I don't remember what that first thing is. Can't wait to put this all back in there later. What's that at the bottom? Is there another thing at the bottom? Okay, that's cool. Alright, so first things first is the game. The game itself, right? Just you could have bought this at release as well, just the game. But there's a couple cool things in here. Let's open all of them. This first one, well, I could do this one first. It's in bubble, yeah, actually I can take it out. It's a stand, I'm assuming, for the game, or maybe for the cartridge, but it says Nintendo on it. Normally I wouldn't care too much, but it's cool that it says Nintendo specifically on it. That's cool. Next is this box. There's 2 boxes in here that look identical. I don't know which one is which. I don't quite remember what the contents of this are, even though it's on the inside. So we'll open it just to see what's in it. First time on a Maximum Collecting video that we have a unboxing. This one is, this one is the pin set. So pin set of Super Mario Bros., Legend of Zelda, NWC, Metroid, and Donkey Kong, all that say Nintendo World Championships at the bottom of each one. That's pretty cool. Gotta make sure I don't want to have a huge mess here, but you know, these things happen. The other this one, I think I know what this is right away. Kind of similar, you know, collector's edition type stuff. This one is, how do I open this one? Okay, like that. And the other box has a ton of postcards of the original games. Not actually postcards, they're kind of like cardboard prints, but Super Mario Bros., Legend of Zelda, Metroid, Donkey Kong, Kid Icarus, Super Mario 2, Excite Bike, Ice Climber, Balloon Fight, Super Mario 3, as the stuff is flying all over my room once again, Legend of Zelda 2, Super Mario Bros., The Lost Levels, Kirby's Adventure. All of those games that are all included on the cartridge, but also there's art on the back for each one. So that's pretty cool as well. That's a very neat piece in terms of putting stuff into a collector's edition. And once again, trying to make sure I don't make an absolute mess, even though stuff is already flying around my room. And last but not least, from the North American release, until we get into the Japanese one to show that stuff off, is a gold Nintendo World Championship cartridge. Unfortunately, not real. There's no pins on the inside. There's not even room for you to like put a board in there, which kind of stinks. I may or may not have bought a gold cartridge just to make a fake gold NWC, but that's fine. It's no big deal. But this one, really, really cool, you know, in terms of Nintendo history, having the gold Nintendo World Championship cartridge, at least to put on display. So I doubt I will actually put it on display with the display thing, but you know, still very, very cool. Now, you would think that the Japanese version is almost exactly the same thing, but that is not entirely true. The Japanese version has at least one completely different thing. Oh, also, the gold cartridge comes with a like a Nintendo sleeve. This is what NES games used to come with back in the day, so it's cool to get that on this one. Get that on this one now. So let's get into the Japanese one then. So there's the Japanese box one more time. Not only is there one unboxing here on Maximum Collecting, we have 2. That's crazy. Same thing, this one, the game itself looks pretty similar, minus, you know, the Japanese text, but still pretty cool. It's kind of interesting. The American release had a barcode on the back to show that it was the same one that was released at retail. This one doesn't, so not that this game is going to be any different from a regular release in Japan, but it is cool to see the difference between a non-limited release and a limited release. There's also a similar thing to the postcards or the cardboard prints in the American version. They have Famicom boxes. These are held together by plastic, so I don't totally want to rip that apart, but all the games are right there as well. That's pretty cool. Also, there's Famicom Disk System games on this one, so you know, we in North America only got NES cartridges, but in Japan there was the Famicom cartridges, as well as the Famicom Disk System cartridges, which was just an add-on to the Famicom. So there's some games that we got as just cartridges, but Japan got as cartridges and or a floppy disk to play. So games of both types were released in Japan, and both types of games were included in this release, which is also pretty cool. This one should be, I'm assuming these are the pins. Yep, there you go. Pins, identical looking pins, minus the fact that the Nintendo World Championships one has Japanese text. All the other ones are in English, so I think those are pretty much the exact same pins. But the one really, really big difference with the Japanese version, America, we got the gold cartridge, which is pretty cool, but no practical use. However, in Japan, they got making a mess. 2 controllers, but these aren't just fake Famicom controllers. These are real working controllers. So Nintendo Switch Online has offered original looking controllers for all of their online games that you could just connect to your Switch. So there's NES controllers, there's Super Nintendo controllers, there's N64 controllers for sure, and there was also Famicom ones already. I think these have already been released in Japan, but it is cool that this entire bundle has 2 completely working controllers included in it. So, Japanese version similarly is cool, maybe a little bit more practical than the North American release, but nonetheless, still really, really freaking cool. So, with that said, that is everything that I got this summer. I know I made the last part of this go really long, just unboxing these to actually see what was inside the North American one, but cool nonetheless. And yeah, with that said, that's the end of this summer of content. So it wasn't really the plan going into the summer. I just had ideas for videos, and I ended up releasing a video every single week for the past 2 months, a little over 2 months. By the time you're seeing this, it'll be 2.5 months since the first one came out. I think the first one was June 14th, and that was the first video of several weeks worth. So in a sense, I'm calling this a summer of content. So if you have watched this long into the video, you've probably watched that long into all my other videos. So sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for watching videos this summer. I love doing this because it's just fun to make videos and just talk to people that I know are my friends. If you are not somebody who knows me in person, I hope you've been enjoying it too. And yeah, I love doing this. I don't think it'll continue for long, get back to the full grind during the school year. But yeah, super duper cool, super cool to be able to do this. And yeah, thank you again so much for watching. If you have been watching all these videos, or if you've watched to just the end of this video, thank you so much for watching this one again. So yeah, with that said, bye.